This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Paul Hansen. Thurley, Ruxton by Philip Verrill Mighels. Chapter 46. Answering the Count. Thurley did not rest. Her brain was too alive and the fever too active in her pulses. Mysterious arrivals plus an air of hurry and excitement pervaded all the house. She suffered herself to be dressed for dinner in a dainty gown that, with its softness and its frailty, completely belied the strength, the courage, and the resolution with which she was amply endowed. Major Phipps appeared in time for dinner. He was, if possible, more tanned, more explosive, and more hearty than ever before. His admiration for Thurley was likewise more pronounced. He bragged of her discovery quite immodestly, taking such mountains of credit to himself that Alice was thoroughly shadowed. "'Tis one truly noteworthy and credible achievement of my career, by George," he asserted. "Re-establishes my mental acumen, it does, sir. I've said so repeatedly. But by the gods of battle, that satisfaction is nothing compared with the fatherly affection engendered in my breast, fatherly and brotherly and unclish and angelic," Alice supplied dryly. "It's very beautiful and touching, but will you kindly indicate whether or not you will have some peas, thereby providing a moment for Thurley's blushes to subside?" Thurley's colour, however, was destined for the briefest subsistence. The Major kept it flaming pleasurably for an hour, both during and after dinner, and 8 o'clock romped in upon them all. It seemed quite prematurely to ignite it again. Alice herself was nervously perturbed and a trifle feverish when one of the servants came to announce the arrival of Count Faïschi. The Major excused himself in haste and promptly disappeared. Alice, in one of her motherly moods, came swiftly to her princess and placed both hands on her shoulders. "Because he happened to demand that he see you alone is no reason why Faïschi should be gratified unless you wish it," she said. "I feel as if perhaps it might be much easier if I remained with you as chaperone all the time he is here." "If the horrid creature should attempt what he did before," Thurley halted, vividly remembering the kiss that Faïschi had dared to misappropriate. "Of course he wouldn't if you were there, and yet if he's here to demand, perhaps the way we have planned it is the best after all. You're sure that that everything is ready?" "Leave it to me," said Alice, a little pale, but smiling. "I'll go with you now and excuse myself at once." They went together to the golden room, where the Count was impatiently waiting. He was flushed with a sense of victory over Gaillard and his own irresistible prowess with the woman. He had sent great masses of roses earlier, and was certain now that the single American beauty worn on Thurley's bosom was selected from his offering. He could never have dreamed it was Syverin's rose, worn as a token of their comradeship and also as a talisman to guard her heart from evil. To do him credit for mere physical appearance, the Count had never been handsomer in his life. His glossy black hair, his damask skin, and his long-lashed eyes, which burned like molten garnets, dashed with liquid whirls of brown and ebony, were practically physical perfection. Only his mouth, over-red and sensuous, supplied a hint of the animal crouched behind his mask. He wasted no energy in passing the time of day. "Ah, the banishment of all the little fidgeting world!" he exclaimed in immediate rapture as Thurley and Alice advanced to give him formal greeting. "By division of yourself, I am transported, yes, as on the wings of ecstasy that for the highest exaltation shall exist," and he took Thurley's hand to raise it towards his lips, almost ignoring Alice, to whom he should have first addressed himself. Thurley smiled conventionally, withdrawing her hand with a firm, slow gesture, at once reserved and vigorous. "How interesting if visions took the place of aeroplanes," she answered lightly. "It is said the transportation business is very profitable." "Ah," said Fieschi. "Madam Van Kirk, I am charmed likewise at this encounter. Yes." "Only charmed?" said Alice, arching her brows. "Not one little flight when you see me? Perhaps you wish to surprise me later." Thurley felt her heart give a knock at the hidden suggestion. "Ah," said the Count, "it is not a fault to be blind, it is one of affliction. Shall I not be blind when I thus behold Miss Thurley?" To give him due credit, once again Thurley was matchless, brilliantly, bewilderingly beautiful. The animation of suppressed excitement, plus the fire of resentment, outblazing jewel marvels in her eyes, her colour and her pulses vibrant with life, reduced to sheer loveliness and magnetism. Never had prettier partition grace enthroned itself in her carriage. Her golden hair was such a coronet as regal simplicity might choose for its dainty queen. Her arms and her shoulders were superb. Ariel, Titania, Diana, the exquisite beings and goddesses of all the ages, might have bequeathed her a tithe apiece of their own loveliness to make her the princess she was. "Blind?" said Alice. "I have often wondered if love is so blind that a married man cannot see another pretty woman." If the Count changed colour for a second, he instantly laughed it away. "Ah, this American wit," said he. "The rapier is not more quick, more certain." He was ill at ease with Alice in the room, but concealed his impatience with some degree of art. "Well," said Alice, shrugging her shoulders, "since I am not seen, perhaps I may be excused for a moment, by your leave." Fieschi made little concealment of his pleasure, thus to be left alone with Thurley. No sooner was Alice gone than he strode hot paced to where the princess had taken a seat. She rose at once, not to be taken at the slightest disadvantage. "For this a moment I have lived, and could have died," he breathed with suddenly liberated fervour, once more catching up her hand and attempting to press his lips upon it. "If it were only that some word were sufficiently beautiful to name you in, some word more fragrant, more passionate, more enraptured than divinity. Ah, how my soul would leap to its birth, to lay it at your feet, my idol, my—" "Will you not be seated?" Thurley interrupted, her breath coming quickly, her anger rising as she felt the insult of his words and glances, while his eyes sought to rivet her own. "You mention in your notes some special reason for an interview. Ah, and you have not guessed? You have not been aware of my soul's desire, my famishing of the spirit, my heart's consuming thirst? I did not suppose even walls, the horrible tumult of the city, anything could upon it avail to close it out. But I have waited its accomplishment. How, God alone knows, this waiting. But I wished to come with my hands, my arms brimming with fortune. It is done. I have come tonight to tell me you have made a fortune. May I offer my congratulations?" Thurley was a little fearful of his ardour, fearful of some spring of the animal she felt behind his smile and eyes. She could only hope for a moment to dash his heats with the coldly commonplace. As well might she have attempted to dash a Vesuvian eruption. "The fortune, bah!" said Fieschi more warmly than before, his hands fairly wrung and perspiring with impatience to clasp her hotly by the arms and to strain her lips to his. It is a bauble only, to drop at your feet and forget. But the love I lavish, the adoration—" "Listen," said Thurley, interrupting desperately. "I thought I heard the bell. I must ask your pardon if I presently have to excuse myself. I am expecting another caller, who is likewise coming on business." "Business?" echoed Faishi. "Business?" Thurley's strength came surging to her aid. "What else could it be you particularly wished to say?" The Count was increasingly agitated. "It is not a business, the mighty demand of the soul," he cried to her fervently. "Yet I have tried to ask before, and I ask again, a definite answer from your heart, your lips. You are now already my soul's one choice, my all. But you will be my wife?" Thurley paled when it came, prepared as she was to hear his declaration and request. Anger and scorn flared quickly in her eyes, despite her efforts at control. "Your answer to that?" she asked lightly, clasping her hands and trembling with surcharged dynamics of the moment. "Your answer, Count Faishi, is here." A door behind him had opened at the signal. He turned like a cat as her glance sped past his shoulder. Countess Faishi, who had come here once to threaten, and if need be to fight for her rights, came haltingly into the room in front of Alice. She was white as paper. She put out her hand to support herself from falling, weakly groping for a chair near by, as her eyes remained fixed on the Count. "Válgame Dios!" breathed the suddenly wilted Faishi. "Por amor de Dios y todos los santos!" "It is my right to come," cried the trembling wife, by way of meeting the blazing anger, shame, and accusation flaring in his gaze. "Forgive me, José. It is my love. I could not bear to let you go." She went down abruptly on her knees at his feet and clasped him wildly by the legs. "God help me if I love you so," she added, "for I was sure I had my love from God." "Oh, Thurley," said Alice quietly, "may I see you for a moment?" Thurley turned to the Count, who remained there, livid and helplessly staring at his wife. "You will excuse me, I am sure, if I say good evening?" But the Count had been stricken deaf and dumb, as well as pallid and blind. He made no reply as Thurley and Alice quitted the room and left him fully answered. Later they heard the closing of the door that led to the outside world. A servant came to announce, in accordance with directions, that the Count and Countess were gone. The evening had fairly begun. End of chapter 46.